My name is Belinda Moore. I am 28 years old, and for 5 years I worked double shifts at a freight logistics center in Nevada to save for a single luxury Caribbean cruise. I packed my cheap lunches in plastic containers, ignored my cracked car windshield, and skipped every weekend getaway with my friends. The night before my flight to Miami, my suitcase sat zipped by the front door. My phone rang at 9:30. My mother, Susan, did not bother saying hello. "You have to watch your sister's kids tomorrow," she said. It was an order delivered with the tight, rushed tone she always used when my older sister Jessica created another disaster. "I leave in 8 hours," I told her. "My trip is paid for." My mother exhaled a sharp breath into the receiver. "Jessica has an emergency. You can take a vacation any time. She needs you now." I stared at the handle of my luggage. I felt the familiar weight of every birthday dinner I had canceled, and every holiday I had spent babysitting because Jessica failed to plan. When I refused, the line rustled. My father, Richard, snatched the phone. "You owe this family," he said, his voice dropping into a harsh command. "We do not abandon each other. Cancel the trip, Belinda. We will sort out the refunds later." They always promised refunds. I never saw a dime. "No," I said, "not this time." I hung up and silenced my phone. An hour later, Jessica sent a text. It read, "You are so selfish. You will change your mind when you see them." I brushed it off as just another guilt trip meant to wear me down. The next morning, the Nevada sun rose over the airport terminal. My phone screen lit up over and over with calls from my parents, but I kept it muted. I handed my boarding pass to the agent and walked down the jet bridge beside my best friend, Sarah. For the first time, I kept a promise to myself. 7 hours later, our flight landed in Miami. When I turned my phone back on, a flood of alerts froze the screen. I had 38 missed calls. They were from my parents, Jessica, and the Henderson Police Department back home. Jessica's final message held only 4 words: "They are at your door." What my sister did turned a simple boundary into a formal child welfare investigation, exposed thousands of dollars in hidden fraud, and forced my parents to face the monster they had enabled. Before I explain the fallout, tell me your age, where you are watching from, and what the weather is like today. Welcome to Grape Vengeance, where we uncover the truth behind family secrets. I want to know how far my story reaches. I stood in the busy Miami terminal. People brushed past me, pulling colorful rolling bags, laughing about their upcoming vacations. My hands gripped my phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Sarah noticed my rigid posture and reached for my carry-on bag. I did not speak. I opened the home security app connected to my house. The loading wheel spun for 2 agonizing seconds, then the recorded clips populated the screen. The first video was time-stamped at 8:14 that morning. That was barely an hour after my plane took off. A dark sedan pulled into my empty driveway. Jessica stepped out into the 43-degree desert chill. She did not look frantic or panicked. Her movements were steady and calculated. She opened the back doors and pulled out my 9-year-old nephew, Leo, and my 6-year-old niece, Mia. They carried small backpacks. Jessica marched them straight to my porch. She knocked on the door 3 times, then looked up into the camera lens. Her face held a cold, defiant stare. "Your aunt is inside," she told her own children. "She is probably in the shower. Just wait right here." Leo pointed a finger back at the empty driveway, but Jessica was already walking away. She slid an envelope under my doormat, got back into the sedan, and drove off. The next video clip broke my heart. Leo knocked on the door again. Mia sat down on her backpack and pulled her arms inside her thin windbreaker. 20 minutes passed on the timestamp. Mia started crying. Leo took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. He pulled a small tablet from his bag and tried to tap the screen, but it went black. The battery was dead. Watching a 9-year-old boy try to keep his little sister warm on concrete sent a rush of heat straight to my face. Jessica did not just ask for a favor. She weaponized her children. She knew I had a flight. She banked on my guilt, assuming I would look at my cameras, panic, and beg the airline to let me off the plane. She abandoned them at a locked house to force my compliance. The voicemail icon on my screen glowed red. I pressed play. A gruff voice introduced himself as an officer with the local police. My neighbor had noticed the kids shivering on the porch, checked my windows, and called the authorities when no adult answered. The officer stated the children were safe at the station, but Child Protective Services was getting involved because no legal guardian could be located. I dialed the officer back immediately. The line clicked, and he answered. I identified myself and explained I was standing in an airport in Florida. I gave him my flight details as proof. He let out a heavy sigh, confirming Leo and Mia were sitting in a holding room, eating graham crackers. My parents had just arrived at the station. The officer put me on a brief hold. When the line reconnected, it was not the police. It was my mother. "Belinda, you need to get on a plane and come home right now," she cried into the receiver. Her voice carried no concern for the children, only sheer panic about her own reputation. "You caused this. Your sister is under so much pressure and you left." I squeezed my eyes shut, blocking out the bright airport lights. "I told you I was leaving last night," I answered. My mother lowered her voice into a sharp hiss. "Jessica left them outside an empty house because she thought you were there. She had to go to a mandatory corporate retreat in Denver. You have to tell the police there was a misunderstanding. Do you want your own flesh and blood put into foster care while you sit on a beach?" The phrasing was intentional. For my entire life, my parents framed Jessica's toxic choices as a test of my loyalty. Whenever I tried to step away, they accused me of lacking compassion. But the children were safe with professionals now. I knew that flying back would not undo the abandonment. It would only teach my sister that creating a bigger disaster guaranteed a bigger rescue from me. I squared my shoulders. "I will not lie to the police," I said, "and I am not flying home to fix her crime." My father shouted something in the background about me destroying the family. I tapped the red button, ending the call. I stood frozen near the baggage claim carousels inside the Miami airport terminal. Travelers moved around me in a blur of bright vacation clothes and rolling suitcases, laughing and pointing toward the exit doors. The dial tone echoed in my ear after I disconnected the call with my angry father. My best friend Sarah stopped walking and turned to face me. She did not ask if I was okay. She looked at my rigid posture and the flashing notifications lighting up my phone screen. I did not speak. I simply opened the home security app connected to my house in Henderson, Nevada. The loading circle spun for 3 agonizing seconds before the dashboard populated with recorded motion events. I tapped the first video thumbnail. The recording was timestamped at 8:14 that morning. That was barely an hour after my flight departed the runway. Sarah leaned over my shoulder, her eyes fixed on the glowing screen. A vehicle pulled into my empty driveway. Sarah works as a fraud investigator for a major insurance firm. Her brain is trained to catch details most people ignore. "Pause the video," she instructed. I tapped the screen. Sarah pointed at the vehicle. "That is not Jessica's car," she said. "My sister drove a battered silver minivan covered in peeling bumper stickers. The car idling in my driveway was a sleek, dark luxury sedan with expensive rims and tinted windows." I zoomed in on the driver's side door. The window was rolled down a few inches. A man's arm rested casually on the doorframe. He wore a heavy silver watch that reflected the morning sunlight. I stared at the screen, my heart beating a fast, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Jessica always presented herself as an exhausted single mother who could barely afford groceries. She constantly claimed she had no time or energy to date. Yet here she was, sitting in a high-end luxury vehicle with an unknown man. I hit the play button again. Jessica stepped out of the passenger side and into the 43-degree desert chill. She did not look panicked or frantic. Her movements were smooth and calculated. She opened the back doors and pulled out Leo and Mia. The kids wore thin windbreakers and carried small school backpacks. Jessica grabbed a plastic grocery bag and a thin fleece blanket from the trunk. She marched them straight up my front walkway. She did not look around for my car. She walked directly to my porch, knocked on the heavy wooden door 3 times, and then turned her face toward the security camera lens. She held a cold, defiant stare. "Your aunt is inside," she told her children. Her voice was perfectly clear on the audio feed. "She is probably in the shower. Just wait right here." Leo frowned and pointed a small finger back toward my empty driveway, clearly confused. But Jessica was already turning her back on them. She slid a thick manila envelope under my welcome mat, walked back to the idling sedan, and got in. The car backed out and disappeared down the street. Sarah pulled her own phone out of her pocket and opened her email. As a fraud investigator, she knew exactly how fast evidence could disappear. "Send me every single clip right now," she commanded, her voice steady and professional. "Do not just leave them on the cloud server. Download them directly to your camera roll and forward them to me. Your sister did not make a mistake today. She staged a scene. You need a permanent, undeniable record before she tries to delete her tracks or change her story." I nodded, my fingers moving quickly across the screen to save the files. The app automatically loaded the next motion clip. This recording broke my heart. Leo knocked on the door again, his small knuckles hitting the wood. Mia sat down on her backpack. She pulled her arms inside her jacket to escape the biting wind. 20 minutes passed on the timestamp. Mia began crying. Her little shoulders shook. Leo took off his own jacket and draped it over his sister. He pulled a small tablet from his backpack and tapped the screen frantically, trying to call someone for help. The screen stayed black. The battery was dead. Watching a 9-year-old boy try to protect his little sister from the cold on a concrete slab sent a rush of heat straight to my face. My hands shook. Jessica did not just ask me for a last-minute favor. She orchestrated a calculated hostage situation. She knew I was already on my way to the airport. She knew my security camera sent instant motion alerts to my phone. The sheer entitlement of her plan made my stomach churn. For years, she had used my empathy as a weapon against me. If she needed money, she brought up the kids. If she needed free labor, she brought up the kids. She treated my niece and nephew like casino chips, pushing them to the center of the table to force me to fold. But leaving them alone in the freezing cold was a line she had never crossed before. She truly believed my fear for their safety would trump my desire to finally live my own life. She intended for me to sit in my airplane seat, look at my screen, and see her children shivering. She banked on my guilt overriding my boundaries. She assumed I would panic grab my luggage and beg the flight attendants to let me off the aircraft before takeoff. My phone vibrated in my palm, pulling me away from the terrible video. The caller ID showed Martha, the vigilant elderly widow who lived next door to me. I answered the call. Martha sounded out of breath. "Belinda, I am so sorry to interrupt your trip," she said, her voice shaking. "I just wanted to make sure you knew what happened." I told her I had just seen the camera footage. Martha let out a ragged sigh. "I was drinking my coffee by the window when I saw them," she explained. "Little Mia was crying so hard, I put on my coat and walked over. Leo told me you were in the shower." Martha paused, clearing her throat. "I knocked on your door, but I knew you were already gone because I saw your airport taxi pull away hours earlier. When I told Leo you were not home, his face just dropped. He told me his mother promised you were waiting inside." I felt a sharp pain behind my eyes. Leo was old enough to know when the adults in his life were lying, but he still tried to stay brave. Martha continued. "I brought them a blanket from my house and called the police. The dispatcher told me to stay with them until a patrol car arrived." I thanked Martha for protecting them and ended the call. The anger inside me shifted from a dull ache into a sharp, focused blade. I pulled up the voicemail left by the local police department and dialed the return number. A dispatcher transferred me to the responding officer. I identified myself and explained that I was currently standing in a Florida airport. I read him my flight confirmation number as proof that I was never at the house. The officer let out a heavy breath. He confirmed that Martha had waited with the children until his unit arrived. He told me Leo and Mia were currently safe and sitting in a holding room at the station eating snacks. However, the tone of his voice carried a heavy warning. Because Jessica abandoned them at an empty residence and could not be reached by phone, the situation had escalated. The children were no longer just waiting for a babysitter. They were officially in the legal system. A formal child welfare investigation had been triggered the moment the police placed them in the squad car. My sister thought she was playing a game of emotional chicken with me. She thought leaving them on the porch would force my hand and make me cancel my life to clean up her mess. Instead, her gamble had invited the state government into her life. Sarah watched my face as I disconnected the call with the police. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked down at my phone. "I am going on my cruise," I told her, "and I am sending every single piece of this footage to the authorities." The stakes had skyrocketed far beyond a petty family dispute. I was no longer dealing with a sister who just needed a favor. I was dealing with a woman who endangered her own children to punish me for saying no, and I was going to make sure she faced the reality of that choice. We stepped out of the air-conditioned airport and into the humid Florida heat. The shuttle bus to the Miami cruise port waited at the curb. My phone vibrated in my palm before I even reached the luggage rack. The screen displayed my mother's face. I pressed accept and brought the speaker to my ear. I expected to hear relief that Leo and Mia were safe. Instead, a shrill, hysterical voice pierced my eardrum. "How could you do this?" Susan screamed. The background noise sounded hollow, echoing off tile walls. She was already at the police station. "You left them there! You knew she had an emergency and you just got on a plane?" My jaw locked tight. My mother was standing in a police precinct because my older sister dumped 2 small children on a freezing porch. Yet somehow Susan had twisted the narrative to make me the villain. "I did not leave them on a porch." I kept my voice flat and even. "Jessica did. She thought you were inside," my mother cried, her voice cracking. "Now we have officers treating us like criminals. Child Protective Services is here, Belinda. A social worker is asking us questions because they cannot find Jessica, and we are not the legal guardians." "You created this mess by walking away." I pulled my phone away from my ear for a second, stunned by the sheer gravity of her delusion. For my entire life, Richard and Susan treated Jessica like a fragile glass sculpture. She was the golden child who could do no wrong. Whenever Jessica shattered, I was expected to sweep up the broken pieces and pretend the floor was clean. If I refused, my parents accused me of being a bad sister. Now, they were extending that same toxic protection to cover child abandonment. "Where is Jessica?" I asked. I heard muffled voices on the other end. A male officer was speaking to my parents. He asked the exact same question. Susan covered the receiver, but she did not press the mute button fast enough. I heard her lie straight to a uniformed officer. "My daughter is at a mandatory corporate retreat in Denver," Susan told the police. "She had a sudden flight. It was a terrible childcare miscommunication." A corporate retreat? I thought back to the security footage. I pictured the sleek, dark sedan and the unknown man wearing the heavy silver watch. Jessica was not on a corporate retreat. She was playing a dangerous game, and my mother was actively covering her tracks. I ended the call without another word. My fingers shook as I opened my messaging app. I typed a direct text to Jessica. "Where are you?" I wrote. "The police found Leo and Mia outside my house." I watched the 3 gray dots bubble on the screen. She was awake. She was reading it. A moment later, her reply appeared. "I told you I needed help. You chose a selfish vacation. Do not act shocked that there are consequences." My stomach twisted. She felt no remorse. She viewed her own children as collateral damage in a war to prove she controlled my life. Sarah peered over my shoulder, reading the glowing text message. Her eyes narrowed. Sarah dealt with insurance fraudsters every single day. She knew exactly how manipulators operated. "Screenshot that right now," Sarah ordered, her tone shifting into pure professional mode. "Do not reply. Just save it. Your sister is trying to build a narrative where you are negligent. We need to build a timeline of her actual choices." I pressed the side buttons on my phone, capturing the venomous text. I organized the security videos, the time-stamped flight confirmation, and the messages into a single digital folder. By the time we boarded the cruise ship, my phone held a vault of undeniable evidence. We walked onto the sprawling deck. The ocean breeze blew past us, carrying the smell of salt and sunscreen. Music played from the pool area. It was the vacation I had sacrificed 5 years of my youth to earn. But my mind was stuck in a cold Nevada police precinct. My phone rang again. It was Susan. This was the second wave of the attack. "Belinda, listen to me," she said, her voice dropping into a low, frantic whisper. She was no longer crying. She was negotiating. "The social worker is talking about temporary placement. Foster care, Belinda. Do you understand what that means?" I gripped the metal railing of the ship. "The kids should stay with David," I replied. David was Jessica's ex-husband and the children's father. "David is out of town for work," Susan snapped, delivering another lie. "And we are too old to qualify for emergency placement without a home inspection. They need a verified guardian. You need to book a flight back right now. If you do not come home, your niece and nephew are going to sleep in a stranger's house tonight." The trap was set. This was the ultimate boundary test. My mother was using the deepest, darkest fear any family could face to force my compliance. She was weaponizing the trauma of 2 innocent children to protect Jessica from facing the law. I closed my eyes. I pictured Leo wrapping his thin jacket around Mia. I felt a crushing wave of guilt try to pull me under. It would be so easy to cave. I could walk off this ship, buy a returning ticket, fly back to Nevada, and sign the paperwork. I could rescue them. But then I realized the truth. Returning would not erase the trauma those kids experienced on that porch. It would only teach Jessica a terrifying lesson. It would prove that if she manufactured a big enough disaster, she was guaranteed a rescue. It would teach her that endangering her kids was the most effective way to control me. If I went back, I was not saving the children. I was ensuring she would do this to them again. I opened my eyes and looked out at the blue water. I will cooperate with CPS, I told my mother, keeping my voice steady. I will send them every piece of evidence I have, but I am not getting off this ship. I am not flying home to fix her crime. Silence hung on the line for 3 long seconds. Then the phone shuffled. My father's voice boomed through the speaker, vibrating with sheer rage. "You selfish brat!" Richard screamed. "You are destroying this family!" "Jessica destroyed this family," I answered. "You are just mad that I refuse to hide the bodies anymore." I pressed the end button. I stood on the deck, my heart hammering against my ribs, breathing in the ocean air. I had drawn the hardest line of my life. I expected the silence to last, but my phone buzzed one more time. It was an unknown Nevada number. I answered. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Angela. She was the assigned Child Protective Services caseworker, and what she told me next proved that my sister's lies were already falling apart. The morning sun bled through the small porthole window of our cabin, casting a warm golden light across the narrow room. The gentle rocking of the ocean liner should have felt relaxing. Instead, my stomach churned with a nauseating dread. I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the blank screen of my phone. Sarah sat across from me at the small desk, sipping black coffee from a paper cup. She did not try to offer empty comfort. She simply watched the device in my hands, waiting for the inevitable fallout. At 8:15, the screen illuminated. An unfamiliar Nevada phone number flashed across the display. I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Angela Ruiz. She was the assigned caseworker for Child Protective Services in Henderson. Unlike my mother, Angela did not yell. She did not attempt to manipulate my emotions or hurl accusations. Her voice carried the calm, measured tone of a seasoned professional who untangled family disasters for a living. She informed me that Leo and Mia spent the night in a temporary emergency foster placement because the state required a vetted certified home environment. I felt a sharp ache behind my ribs. My nephew and niece slept in a strange bed because my sister treated them like disposable pawns. Angela cleared her throat. "Ms. Moore, I am calling because I need to verify some information your parents provided to law enforcement last night. The story we are getting does not align with the facts we uncovered this morning." My grip tightened on the plastic phone case. "What did my mother say?" I asked. "Your mother stated that Jessica suffered a sudden childcare collapse while preparing for a mandatory corporate retreat in Denver. She claimed your sister panicked and left the children at your residence under the assumption you were still home." Angela paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I spoke with the human resources director at the logistics firm where your sister works, or rather where she used to work." The floor of the cabin seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There is no corporate retreat in Denver," Angela said, her tone flattening into hard facts. "Your sister was terminated from her position 14 days ago. Her former employer confirmed she has not set foot in that building for 2 weeks. Furthermore, her current location is entirely unknown. She is not answering calls from our agency, the police, or her parents." I stopped breathing for a second. Terminated. 2 weeks ago. A barrage of questions flooded my mind. If Jessica lost her job 2 weeks ago, what was she doing every morning when she supposedly dropped the kids off before heading to the office? Where was she going? How was she paying her rent? The Denver trip was a fabricated alibi designed to buy her time. Angela shifted her line of questioning, her voice growing sharper. "Ms. Moore, I need you to be honest with me. We are trying to determine the immediate danger to these children. Does Jessica have a history of vanishing? Does she struggle with financial instability? Is she prone to making reckless decisions regarding her dependents?" The silence stretched between us. A familiar, suffocating pressure seized my throat. This was the ingrained family reflex kicking in. For 28 years, my parents trained me to protect the family image at all costs. The unspoken rule was simple. You never air dirty laundry to strangers. You smile, you cover the debts, and you pretend everything is fine. If I told this state worker the truth, I was breaking the blood pact. I was crossing a line my parents would never forgive. I felt the urge to offer a vague excuse to downplay the situation to protect my sister from the legal consequences of her actions. Then I looked down at my phone screen. I pictured the motion-detected video from yesterday morning. I saw 9-year-old Leo standing on a freezing concrete porch. I saw him pull his own thin jacket off his back to wrap it around his shivering little sister. The toxic family code built that freezing reality. Protecting my sister meant endangering those kids. I chose to burn the code down. "No," I told Angela, my voice steadying. "This is not a sudden mistake. This is her standard operating procedure. She manufactures emergencies to extract money and free labor from everyone around her." I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end of the line. Angela was taking notes. "Go on," she instructed. I started pulling the skeletons out of the closet, laying them bare for the state to see. I explained how Jessica spent the last 10 years weaponizing guilt. I detailed the pattern. I told Angela about the time 3 years ago when Jessica claimed her car transmission died. She cried that she would lose her job and face eviction if she could not pay the repair shop. I emptied my savings account and handed her $700. A week later, I saw photos of her holding expensive drinks in a VIP section at a music festival. The transmission was never broken. I told Angela about last winter. Jessica called my parents sobbing, claiming her ex-husband David stopped paying child support. She said she could not afford winter coats or school supplies for Leo and Mia. I bought the coats. My parents paid her rent. A month later, David showed me the official state treasury receipts proving his wages were garnished automatically every single week. He never missed a payment. Jessica pocketed my parents' rent money and bought herself a luxury gym membership. "Every crisis is a calculated performance," I explained, pacing the narrow floor of the cabin. "She creates a disaster that looks accidental. She presents herself as an exhausted, overwhelmed mother. Then she waits for the guilt to force one of us to open our wallets or sacrifice our time. When the resources dry up, she escalates the crisis. She dumped those kids on my porch because she needed overnight childcare for a trip she could not afford, and she knew I would refuse to pay for a sitter." The keyboard clicking stopped. Angela let out a slow breath. "So she left them in the cold to force your compliance," the caseworker summarized. "Stripping away all the excuses, she gambled with their safety to maintain her lifestyle." "Yes," I answered, "and my parents know exactly who she is." That statement shifted the entire weight of the investigation. Angela's tone grew very serious. "Ms. Moore, if your parents are aware of this pattern, why would your mother look a uniformed police officer in the eye and provide a false alibi about a corporate retreat? Why would she lie to law enforcement to cover up an abandonment charge?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I stopped pacing. Sarah looked up from her coffee, her eyes wide. I realized the terrifying truth. Susan and Richard did not just believe Jessica was a victim of circumstance. They knew she was fired. They had to know. My mother spoke to Jessica every single day. If Jessica lost her income 2 weeks ago, my parents were likely already paying her bills to keep the secret quiet. But lying to the police about a corporate retreat was a massive risk. It was a criminal offense. My parents were terrified of public embarrassment, but this level of deception went far beyond saving face at the country club. They were not just enabling a lazy daughter anymore. They were actively acting as accomplices in a cover-up. I do not know why my mother lied. I told Angela, a cold dread pooling in my stomach. But they are hiding something much bigger than a lost job. They are protecting her from something worse. Angela thanked me for my candor. She warned me that the investigation was expanding rapidly. She asked if I possessed any concrete proof of the financial exploitation I described. She needed evidence to show the family court judge that Jessica's home environment was built on a foundation of fraud. I told her I would send everything I had. We ended the call. I sat back down on the edge of the mattress. The ship swayed gently over the ocean waves. The luxury vacation I dreamed about for half a decade faded into the background. I was standing at the edge of a deep, dark hole my family had dug over the last 10 years. My sister abandoned her children to go on a secret trip. She was unemployed. My parents were lying to the police to hide her tracks. Sarah set her coffee cup on the desk and opened her laptop. If she lost her job 2 weeks ago, she needed cash to fund whatever trip she is currently on. Sarah reasoned, her fraud investigator instincts taking over. She did not ask your parents for the money, or they would have known she was not on a corporate retreat. She had to get it from somewhere else. I reached for my phone. I needed to see exactly how much blood money she had pulled from my veins over the years. I tapped the icon for my banking app, bracing myself for the financial black hole I was about to uncover. I opened the banking application on my phone while the ship swayed gently over the ocean waves. The bright interface illuminated the dim cabin. Sarah pulled her chair closer to the edge of my bed, her eyes sharp and focused. She was no longer just my best friend on a vacation. She was a professional investigator breaking down a scam. We needed concrete proof to send to the state authorities. Angela, the caseworker, required documented evidence to demonstrate that my sister operated a dangerous household. I tapped the search bar within my checking account and typed Jessica's name. A long, endless list of transactions populated the screen. The digital trail of my blind loyalty stretched back for years. I started scrolling through the transfers. Each line item carried a digital memo detailing a fabricated crisis. $200 for emergency groceries, $400 for an overdue power bill, $600 because her minivan needed a new radiator to safely transport her children. My thumb kept swiping downward, revealing a relentless cycle of financial demands. Every time I hit a new year in the timeline, a sick feeling tightened my chest. I watched the numbers add up. Sarah opened a blank spreadsheet on her laptop. "Read the amounts to me," she instructed. Her voice held no pity, only a grim determination to uncover the truth. I read them aloud. $500 for Leo's unexpected dental surgery, $300 to prevent an eviction notice. It took us 20 minutes to reach the bottom of the transaction history. When Sarah hit the calculate button, the final sum flashed on her screen, $8,450. That number stole the air from my lungs. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. That was not just money. That was half a decade of my life. I pictured my old dented sedan sitting in my driveway back in Nevada. I drove that unreliable vehicle through blistering desert summers without air conditioning because I believed I could not afford a repair. I remembered eating instant noodles for weeks to rebuild my savings after Jessica claimed she faced bankruptcy. I skipped my own college graduation trip to help her cover a security deposit on a new apartment. I sacrificed every personal milestone, every small comfort, and every ounce of my youth to act as a human shield for a woman who viewed me as a walking ATM. She did not just ask for help. She orchestrated a calculated payment system. She studied my empathy, recognized my weak spots, and exploited them flawlessly. Whenever she needed cash, she invoked the names of her children. "We need to check public records," Sarah said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Scammers rarely limit their targets to just one person. If she drained your accounts, she likely targeted others. Sarah opened an internet browser and typed Jessica's full name alongside the names of my niece and nephew. She hit enter. A moment later, a crowdfunding website appeared at the top of the search results. Sarah clicked the link. A large, high-resolution photograph loaded on the screen. It was a picture of Leo looking exhausted on a hospital bed. The title above the image read, "Help a Single Mother Fight for Her Son's Health." I leaned closer to the laptop screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I read the campaign description. Jessica spun a tragic tale about Leo requiring specialized, intensive physical therapy that her insurance refused to cover. She claimed she worked 3 jobs but still fell short of the medical bills. She begged the community for help, citing the terrifying prospect of her son losing his mobility. I looked at the total amount raised, $5,200. My stomach churned with pure disgust. The entire campaign was a despicable lie. Leo did not have a debilitating physical condition, and he never required specialized private therapy. I knew for a fact that his school provided standard occupational therapy sessions during normal classroom hours at zero cost to the parents. Jessica took a photo of him recovering from a routine appendix removal 2 years prior and repurposed it to defraud sympathetic strangers online. She painted herself as a heroic, struggling mother while stealing thousands of dollars from kind-hearted people. "We need to cross-reference these dates," Sarah muttered, pulling out her own phone. "Open her social media profiles. Let us see what she was doing when she collected this cash." I opened a popular photo-sharing app and navigated to my sister's public profile. Jessica maintained a carefully curated online persona. To the outside world, she appeared as a glamorous, independent woman who managed to balance motherhood with high-end fashion. I scrolled back to the date the crowdfunding campaign hit its financial goal. I found a post uploaded 2 days after she withdrew the donated funds. The photo showed Jessica posing by a luxury resort pool in Sedona. She wore designer sunglasses and held a crystal champagne flute. The caption read, "Self-care weekend for this exhausted mom, feeling blessed." We kept scrolling, comparing the dates of my bank transfers to her uploads. The correlation was undeniable. The exact same week I sent her $600 to supposedly fix her broken radiator, she posted a mirror selfie holding a brand new Prada handbag. The week I emptied my checking account to cover her fake eviction notice, she uploaded a video showing off fresh, expensive hair extensions and a professional manicure. The emergencies always spiked whenever she desired a luxury item. Her crises were never accidents. They were fundraisers. My compassion was actively weaponized to finance her vanity. A cold, unforgiving rage replaced the sorrow in my chest. I exported the bank statements into a digital file. I took clear screenshots of the fraudulent medical campaign, capturing the donor comments and the withdrawal dates. I saved the photos of her expensive vacations and designer purchases. I drafted an email to Angela, the state caseworker, attaching every single piece of evidence. I wrote a brief direct message explaining that Jessica's sudden abandonment was not a panic attack. It was the collapse of a long-running financial grift. I pressed send, watching the progress bar shoot across the screen. The evidence was now in the hands of the government. I knew the moment Angela reviewed those files, my sister would face severe legal repercussions far beyond a simple negligence charge. Operating a fraudulent charity campaign crossed the line into felony territory. But a darker realization crept into my mind. By exposing Jessica, I was also cutting the financial cord entirely. For years, my parents relied on my blind generosity to subsidize their favorite daughter. Richard and Susan desperately cared about their flawless reputation in our local Nevada community. They preferred to sweep Jessica's failures under the rug, and my bank account acted as their broom. Whenever she faltered, they pressured me to pay up so they would not have to deal with the messy reality of her choices. If my wallet closed permanently, the financial burden would crash directly onto my parents' shoulders, and I knew they did not have the funds to maintain her lavish lifestyle. Exposing this paper trail would trigger a nuclear reaction back home. Richard and Susan would explode when they realized the free money train had derailed forever. They would try to destroy me to protect their perfect illusion. Sarah broke the silence in the cabin. She enlarged a different photo on her screen. It was a picture of Jessica sitting at a fancy steakhouse. The caption claimed she was enjoying a rare night out with girlfriends, but Sarah did not look at Jessica's face. She zoomed in on the edge of the frame. "Look at this reflection in her wine glass." Sarah pointed at the monitor. I squinted at the curved glass. The distortion revealed the silhouette of a man sitting across from my sister, a man wearing a thick, heavy silver watch on his wrist. It was the exact same distinct timepiece I saw resting on the window of the dark sedan in my driveway security footage. If she lost her job weeks ago and her scams are falling apart, Sarah reasoned, her eyes narrowing, who is funding the secret trip she is currently on? And why did she need to dump her kids so urgently to go with him? The pieces began shifting into a terrifying new picture. Jessica was not just scamming her family and strangers online. She was hiding a massive secret life, and the truth behind that luxury sedan was about to blow her entire fraudulent existence wide open. Sarah tapped the laptop screen. Her fingernail rested on the distorted reflection in my sister's wine glass from the social media photo. The silver metal gleamed under the restaurant lights. We turned our attention back to the home security footage from yesterday morning. Sarah loaded the clip of the dark sedan pulling into my driveway. We watched Jessica step out into the cold. But this time, Sarah did not watch my sister. She tracked the driver. The window was rolled down. A man rested his left arm on the doorframe. The morning sun caught the metal on his wrist. It was a heavy gold watch with a custom square face. It matched the reflection in the restaurant photo perfectly. My breath hitched. I knew that watch. I knew the man wearing it. A few months ago, Jessica started name-dropping a local real estate developer named Trent. He was in his late 40s, wealthy, and very married. Jessica always brushed off any questions about him by claiming he was just a professional mentor helping her navigate the corporate world. She posted photos of expensive dinners and charity galas, always tagging him as her career sponsor. But mentors do not drive you to your sister's house at 8 in the morning to abandon your children. Mentors do not sit idle in a running car while a 9-year-old boy begs his mother to explain where his aunt is. Trent was either complicit in this crime or he was deeply fooled by her act. Sarah paused the video. "She is having an affair with a married millionaire," she said, her voice laced with disgust. "And he drove the getaway car." The puzzle pieces snapped together with sickening speed. Jessica was not attending a corporate retreat in Denver. She was going on a romantic getaway with Trent. But wealthy men expect a certain lifestyle from the women they date. Jessica spent years projecting the image of a successful event planner. If she asked him for money to pay a babysitter, her facade would crumble. She needed free overnight childcare to maintain the illusion of her financial independence. My phone vibrated on the mattress. A notification popped up from my social media inbox. It was a message request from an account I did not follow. The name was familiar. It was a woman named Rachel, a junior accountant who worked at the same logistics firm Jessica recently left. I opened the message. The text was long and urgent. "Belinda, I heard about the police being called to your house," Rachel wrote. "Word travels fast in this town. I need you to know the truth about why your sister was terminated. She did not just lose her job. She is facing a criminal investigation." My hands felt numb. "Read it out loud," Sarah instructed. I cleared my throat and read the glowing text. Rachel explained that their company hosted an annual charity auction to raise funds for a local children's hospital. Jessica was the senior coordinator for the event. She handled the vendor contracts and the incoming donations. 2 weeks ago, the accounting department noticed a severe discrepancy in the final ledger. $12,000 was missing. When the auditors dug into the files, they found forged invoices. Jessica had created a dummy vendor account. She routed the missing funds into a digital payment system registered under her own private email address. She stole charity money meant for sick children. My stomach rolled. I felt physically ill. I pictured the children in that hospital ward, the families struggling to pay medical bills, the donors who gave their hard-earned cash in good faith. Jessica took their generosity and used it to buy designer handbags and luxury vacations. She had zero moral compass. She viewed everyone around her as a resource to be drained. "The company fired her on the spot," the message continued. "They are currently compiling the evidence to turn over to the district attorney. I thought you should know because she told everyone in the office she was taking her new boyfriend to Cabo San Lucas this weekend to celebrate a big promotion. Cabo. She was not in Denver. She was sitting on a beach in Mexico sipping margaritas funded by stolen charity money while her own children shivered on my concrete porch." The level of deceit was staggering. She did not just lie to me. She defrauded her employer. She stole from a hospital. She lied to her wealthy boyfriend. She constructed a fragile house of cards built entirely on theft and manipulation. And when that house started collapsing, she used Leo and Mia as sandbags to protect herself. She dumped them at my locked house because hiring a professional nanny for 5 days would cost hundreds of dollars. Money she no longer possessed because she lost her income. Money she could not ask Trent for without admitting she was a fraud. She needed a free, silent solution. She expected me to cancel my cruise, take the kids inside, and keep my mouth shut like I always did. If I had answered her call that night and agreed to babysit, I would have become an unwitting accomplice. I would have sheltered her children while she drank cocktails on a beach using embezzled charity funds. My parents would have praised me for being a good sister. The missing money might have stayed hidden. The sick cycle would have continued until her next inevitable disaster. My refusal to cancel my cruise was the single thread that unraveled her entire criminal tapestry. Sarah closed her laptop, her expression turning lethal. "We have her," she said. "This is the nail in the coffin. Send everything to the caseworker right now." I took screenshots of Rachel's entire message. I paired them with the zoomed-in photos of Trent's gold watch and the security footage of his dark sedan in my driveway. I drafted a second email to Angela Ruiz at Child Protective Services. I attached the new files. I typed a brief explanation detailing the embezzlement allegations, the married boyfriend, and the true location of her supposed corporate retreat. I pressed the send icon. The digital envelope vanished from my screen, carrying my sister's destruction straight to the government. Jessica always relied on my silence. She operated in the shadows because she knew my parents would always force me to protect the family name. By hitting send, I dragged her actions into the harsh light of day. There was no spinning a sob story now. When she finally returned from her stolen vacation, she would not face a sympathetic family ready to forgive her. She would face state investigators armed with a documented trail of felony fraud and child abandonment. The heavy knot in my chest loosened. For the first time in my adult life, I felt a genuine sense of control. The truth was out of my hands. I set my phone down on the small wooden desk and looked out the cabin window at the endless blue ocean. I thought the worst was finally over. I believed I had handed the authorities all the ammunition they needed to hold her accountable. But I was wrong. The betrayal ran much deeper than stolen money and a secret affair. My phone rang again. It was the Henderson Police Department. I answered, expecting a brief update from the responding officer. Instead, his voice carried a grim, cautious tone. "Ms. Moore," the officer said, "we collected the manila envelope your sister left under your doormat. We opened it to process the contents. We found temporary medical authorization forms inside. They grant you full custody of the children for the next 5 days." I frowned, confused by the statement. "I never signed any forms," I told him. "I know," he replied, his voice dropping an octave, "but your signature is at the bottom of the page." The ocean stretched out past the small porthole of my cabin. It was day 3 of the cruise, but I felt no relaxation. The bright blue water offered zero comfort while my family unraveled thousands of miles away in the Nevada desert. I sat on the edge of the mattress, gripping my phone tight against my ear. The local police officer was still on the line. He had just delivered a piece of information that shifted the ground beneath my feet. He told me my signature was at the bottom of a legal document. I told the officer I never signed any paperwork regarding my niece and nephew. I reminded him I was standing in a Florida airport when those kids were dropped off. The officer let out a slow, tired breath. He explained he suspected foul play, which was why he called to verify. He detailed the contents of the thick manila envelope Jessica shoved under my doormat. It contained temporary medical authorization forms. These were official state documents designed to grant a caregiver the legal right to make emergency health decisions for minors. By signing my name on that dotted line, Jessica committed felony identity theft. She forged a legal contract to force me into liability. If little Mia suffered an asthma attack, or if Leo broke his arm on the playground, the local hospital would look at those forged papers and hold me responsible for their care and their medical debts. My sister tried to chain me to her children using a fake signature. But the envelope held more than just legal forms. The officer described a typed 5-day itinerary. Jessica had printed out a demanding schedule for me to follow. It listed school drop-off times, specific meal requirements, and bedtime routines. She orchestrated my entire week without my consent. Then the officer read the most damning piece of evidence aloud. A small yellow sticky note was attached to the back of the medical forms. It was written in Jessica's recognizable looping cursive handwriting. "Mom will take over on Sunday if Belinda throws a fit," the note read. I stopped breathing for a second. Sarah stood across the narrow cabin listening to the call on speakerphone. Her jaw dropped. That single handwritten sentence blew the entire investigation wide open. It proved undeniable premeditation. Jessica knew I had a cruise booked. She anticipated my resistance. She planned her crime around my anger. More importantly, that sticky note exposed my mother. Susan stood inside a police precinct just 24 hours ago and cried to this exact officer. She claimed Jessica suffered a sudden, unexpected childcare collapse. My mother spun a tale about a panicked daughter making a rushed mistake. But that yellow note proved Susan was the designated backup plan all along. My mother knew exactly what her golden child was doing. She lied to law enforcement to protect my sister from an abandonment charge. Sarah paced the small room, her fraud investigator instincts shifting into high gear. She pointed a sharp finger at my laptop resting on the desk. "Tell the officer about the old power bills," Sarah whispered fiercely. "Show them her pattern." I swallowed hard. The past was coming back to haunt my parents, and I was holding the hammer. When I was 22 years old, I received a terrifying letter from an aggressive collection agency. I had a severe delinquent debt for an electricity account at an apartment complex across town. I never lived in that building. Jessica did. She used my name and my social security number to open the utility account because her own credit score was ruined. When I confronted my family about the stolen identity, my father stepped in. Richard paid the overdue balance with his own checkbook. He cornered me in the kitchen and demanded I stay silent. He claimed a formal fraud charge would ruin Jessica's chances of securing a good career. He told me respectable families handled their problems privately. He silenced the victim to protect the thief, prioritizing public image over moral integrity. I cleared my throat and spoke into the phone. I told the Nevada officer about the old utility scam. I explained how Jessica used my social security number years ago and how my father paid cash to cover up the crime. The line went very quiet. The officer stopped typing. "Can you prove that?" he asked, his tone turning sharp. I opened the secure cloud drive on my laptop. I am a highly organized person. I keep digital records of everything, precisely because I grew up in a household where the truth was constantly twisted and rewritten. I clicked through my archived folders. I found the scanned PDF of the original fraudulent power bill bearing my name and Jessica's old address. Right next to it, I had a scanned copy of the canceled check my father wrote to the collection agency. "I will email you the old records right now," I told the officer. "I will also attach high-resolution photos of my actual signature from my driver's license and my passport. You can compare the pen strokes. Jessica presses hard on the paper when she writes. I do not." The officer provided his direct government email address. I drafted the message, attached the PDF files, and hit send. I watched the progress bar shoot across the screen, sealing my family's fate. The implications of that email were staggering. My father thought he was buying peace when he paid off that collection agency years ago. Instead, he created a documented paper trail of his own enabling. By handing those old financial records to the police, I tied my parents directly into my sister's criminal web. Richard and Susan were no longer just innocent bystanders dealing with a difficult daughter. They were participants in a long history of deception. The police now possessed concrete evidence that my father actively concealed identity theft. The trap my parents built for me had finally snapped shut on their own ankles. They demanded I cancel my dream vacation to save the family reputation. Now their precious reputation was about to be dragged through a formal criminal probe. The officer thanked me for my cooperation. He warned me that Jessica would face multiple felony charges upon her return from her secret Mexican getaway. Child abandonment was just the tip of the iceberg. Embezzlement from her employer charity fraud, and now forgery and identity theft were piling up against her. She was facing real prison time. I disconnected the call and set the phone on the mattress. The heavy burden I carried for years began to lift from my shoulders. The toxic system was dismantling itself. But one critical issue remained unresolved. My niece and nephew were currently sitting in a temporary state foster placement. My mother claimed they had to stay with strangers because their biological father was unavailable. Susan insisted David was traveling out of state for work and could not be reached by phone. My niece and nephew were currently sitting in a temporary state foster placement. My mother claimed they had to stay with strangers because their biological father was unavailable. Susan insisted David was traveling out of state for work and could not be reached by phone. She used that narrative to try and force my return. But Susan lied about the Denver corporate retreat. She lied about the sudden panic attack. She lied about being the backup babysitter. If my mother was lying about everything else, there was a high probability she was lying about David too. Jessica spent years painting her ex-husband as a deadbeat. She told everyone in our social circle he was neglectful and unreliable. My parents repeated those ugly claims to anyone who would listen. But I remembered the official state treasury receipts David showed me last winter. I remembered he never missed a single child support payment. I knew he fought for his visitation weekends. I looked up at Sarah. My best friend nodded, knowing exactly where my mind was going. "I need to call David," I said. I opened my contacts list and scrolled down to his name. If David was truly out of town, the kids would remain in state custody until a family court judge made a ruling. But if David was home, my sister's entire control system was about to be permanently destroyed. I pressed the green call button and raised the phone to my ear, listening to the dial tone, waiting to see if the final lie was about to fall. I listened to the dial tone echo against my ear. 1 ring. 2 rings. The ocean breeze blew through the small gap in my cabin window, but my focus remained locked on the phone. My mother insisted David was traveling out of state for a construction contract. She claimed he was unreachable. On the 3rd ring, the line clicked open. A deep voice answered, "Hello, Belinda." He sounded confused. We rarely spoke directly. Jessica always acted as the fierce gatekeeper between her ex-husband and the rest of our family. For years, she painted David as an abusive, neglectful ghost who abandoned his responsibilities. My parents repeated those claims at every holiday dinner, cementing his villain status in our minds. "David, where are you right now?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "I am sitting on my couch in Henderson," he replied. The background noise on his end sounded quiet and normal. A television played a sports broadcast. "Why are you calling me? Is something wrong with the kids?" My mother lied again. David was not out of town. He was sitting in his living room less than 5 miles away from the police station, where his children spent the morning shivering and hungry. I took a deep breath and delivered the news. I told him Jessica dumped Leo and Mia on my concrete porch. I explained she left them in the freezing desert morning without supervision, assuming I would cancel my prepaid vacation to take them inside. I told him a neighbor intervened and the police placed them in emergency state custody. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy enough to break bone. Then I heard the sharp intake of breath. I heard the sound of glass shattering against a hard floor as if he dropped a drinking glass and ignored the mess. "State custody," David repeated, his voice cracking. "My kids are in a foster holding room. Are you kidding me?" I told him I was not joking. I explained the caseworker was searching for a verified legal guardian. The reaction that followed was not the response of a deadbeat father. It was the raw, guttural panic of a parent realizing his children were in danger. David began pacing. I could hear his heavy footsteps through the speaker. He started speaking very fast, his words fueled by pure adrenaline and rage. "This was my custody weekend," David said. His revelation hit me like a physical strike. He explained he was supposed to pick Leo and Mia up from school yesterday afternoon. He cleared his schedule, he bought groceries, he planned to take them to a local science museum, but on Thursday night, Jessica sent him a hostile text message canceling his visitation. She told me she booked a family bonding retreat in the mountains. David explained, his voice shaking with anger. She claimed it was a mandatory therapeutic weekend for Leo, and she threatened to call the police if I showed up at her apartment to enforce the court order. I backed down because I did not want to traumatize the kids with a screaming match in her driveway. The sheer malice of her plan crystallized in my mind. Jessica did not just lack a babysitter. She actively blocked the children's loving father from taking them. She pushed David away using a fabricated therapeutic retreat, all so she could sneak off to Mexico with a married man. She chose to abandon her own flesh and blood on a freezing porch rather than let their dad care for them. Giving them to David would mean admitting she had other plans. It would expose her Cabo trip. She preferred risking their lives over losing her controlling narrative. "David, I need to ask you something else," I said, bracing myself for the next blow. "Do you pay for Leo to receive private physical therapy?" David let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Physical therapy. Leo receives basic occupational therapy through the public school system. It happens during his normal reading block. It costs $0, and the state treasury automatically garnishes my paycheck every single week for child support. I have never missed a dime. Why are you asking me about medical bills?" I told him about the crowdfunding campaign. I explained how Jessica used a photo of Leo recovering from his appendix surgery to raise over $5,000 from sympathetic strangers online. I heard David stop pacing. The line went dead quiet. My sister stole thousands of dollars, claiming she needed to save her son from losing his mobility, while the boy's father consistently paid his court-ordered support and the school provided free services. Jessica weaponized their son's image to fund her designer handbags. "I am hanging up now," David said, his tone shifting from panic to lethal calm. "I am calling my lawyer. Then I am driving straight to the police station." He disconnected the call. I lowered the phone to my lap. Sarah watched my face, waiting for the verdict. "David is going to get them," I told her. Less than 3 hours later, Angela, the caseworker, called me back with an official update. The system moved with surprising speed when a fit-willing biological parent stepped forward. David arrived at the precinct with his court-approved custody agreement, his state-issued child support receipts, and a clean criminal background check. The social workers evaluated his stable apartment, noted his steady employment, and immediately granted him emergency primary custody. Leo and Mia were safe. They were going home with their father. The heavy chain my parents tried to lock around my neck shattered into pieces. Susan spent the entire morning screaming that I was forcing my niece and nephew into the foster system. She weaponized their fear and their trauma, attempting to guilt me into booking a flight back to Nevada. My mother insisted I was the only person who could save them. But safe adults were handling the situation. The system functioned exactly as it was designed to. By refusing to step in, I forced the authorities to locate the parent who actually wanted them. I removed the manufactured obligation my family placed on my shoulders. I stood up from the bed and walked over to the cabin window. The bright afternoon sun reflected off the ocean waves. I felt a profound, sweeping wave of relief wash over my body. The children were safe with David. The legal documents proving Jessica's forgery were in the hands of the police. The fraud evidence was secured. My sister could no longer hide behind my wallet or my silence. Yet beneath that relief, a deep and powerful anger began to boil. I thought about how thoroughly Jessica weaponized those two innocent kids to manipulate everyone around her. She used them to extract cash from me. She used them to defraud strangers on the internet. She used them to punish David, and my parents watched her do it. Richard and Susan facilitated the abuse because it was easier than holding their favorite daughter accountable. My parents thought they held all the cards. They believed their threats about foster care would bring me to my knees. Now that David had custody, their ultimate leverage was gone. I was sitting on a cruise ship entirely beyond their reach, while the consequences of their enabling sped toward them like a freight train. They were about to learn that covering up for a criminal carries a massive price tag. While I watched the sunset over the water, a corporate attorney representing the defrauded Children's Hospital was dialing my father's home phone number. The charity wanted their $12,000 back, and since Jessica was unreachable on a beach in Mexico, the lawyers were hunting for the people who always paid her debts. The illusion of the respectable family was about to burn to the ground, taking my parents' retirement fund with it. The cabin felt different now. The heavy weight pressing on my chest since the night before my flight vanished. David secured his children. The authorities possessed the fraudulent paperwork. I poured a glass of ice water and sat by the window. Sarah packed her beach bag, ready to finally enjoy the amenities we paid for. My phone rested on the small table. I promised myself I would turn it off. I wanted to disconnect. Before my finger could slide across the power button, the screen lit up again. The caller ID displayed my father. My first instinct was to ignore it. Richard spent our last conversation shouting at me. He demanded I sacrifice my vacation to save his pristine reputation. I expected another lecture. I assumed he wanted to yell about David taking custody, but the phone kept ringing. It buzzed against the wood surface, persistent and desperate. I picked it up and tapped the green icon. "Hello," I answered. I prepared my defenses, waiting for the familiar, booming voice. Instead, I heard a ragged, uneven breath. "Belinda," my father said. His tone lacked any trace of his usual commanding arrogance. He sounded small. He sounded terrified. "I need your help." The shift in his demeanor sent a chill down my spine. My father never asked for assistance. He issued orders. He controlled the narrative. If he was begging, the walls of his perfect suburban life were crumbling. I asked him what happened. He let out a harsh sound, a cross between a cough and a sob. "A lawyer called the house an hour ago," Richard explained, his words stumbling over each other. "He represented the Children's Hospital, the charity Jessica stole from. They are preparing a civil lawsuit to recover the embezzled funds. They could not reach her, so they contacted us." I held the phone tighter. The corporate attorneys worked fast. When a charity discovers missing money, they do not wait for the police to finish their criminal investigation. They immediately start hunting for the cash. They wanted their $12,000 back. Since Jessica was ignoring her calls on a Mexican beach, the lawyers targeted the next logical source. They phoned her parents. "I told the lawyer we had nothing to do with her finances," Richard continued, his voice trembling. "I told him Jessica was an independent adult. I threatened to sue him for harassment. Then the lawyer laughed at me, Belinda. He laughed and emailed me a digital copy of a contract." My stomach twisted. "What kind of contract?" I asked. "A guarantor agreement," my father choked out the words. "Susan signed it." The revelation hit me with the force of a freight train. A financial guarantor is a legally binding cosigner. If the primary account holder defaults, the guarantor is legally responsible for the entire debt. Susan did not just give Jessica a few $100s under the table. She officially chained herself to my sister's financial liabilities. "Your mother signed as the guarantor for Jessica's luxury apartment lease," Richard revealed, his voice rising in panic. "She signed for the new car loan. She even co-signed a line of credit Jessica used to pay a defense attorney 2 years ago when she got sued by that wedding vendor. The charity lawyers found the credit line. They are coming after our assets to recoup the stolen funds. They can place a lien on our house." I looked over at Sarah. She paused packing her bag, sensing the severity of the conversation. I put the call on speaker so she could hear the destruction unfolding. "Why would Mom sign those papers?" I asked, though. I already knew the answer. Susan lived in a state of perpetual denial. She wanted to believe Jessica was a successful career woman. By co-signing those loans, my mother artificially propped up that illusion. She bought the fake reality so she could brag to her friends at the country club about her glamorous oldest daughter. Richard let out another agonizing groan. "It gets worse," he whispered. "The lawyer's email made me check our bank statements. I logged into our joint retirement portal. I thought we had a solid nest egg. I planned to retire next spring. I worked 40 years for that money." He stopped speaking. I heard him crying. The sound shocked me. Richard was a stoic, proud man. Hearing him break down felt surreal. "How much is gone?" I asked softly. $30,000, he replied, the number hanging in the air like a death sentence. She drained $30,000 over the last 24 months. She transferred the funds in small increments to avoid triggering the bank alerts. She bled our future dry to pay for Jessica's rent, her car notes, and her shopping habits. Susan stole from our marriage to fund that parasite. The puzzle was finally complete. My mother was not just an enabler, she was an active participant in the financial collapse of her own household. When Susan stood in the police precinct and lied about a corporate retreat in Denver, she was not just protecting Jessica from an abandonment charge, she was protecting herself. If Jessica went to jail, the income stopped. If the income stopped, the creditors would come knocking on Susan's door. My mother lied to law enforcement to keep the house of cards standing because her own name was written on the foundation. The confrontation between my parents must have been earth-shattering. Richard discovered his wife secretly funneled his hard-earned retirement savings to the daughter who caused nothing but chaos. The pristine, respectable family image they worshipped was nothing but a hollow shell. They were broke, and they were legally tied to a felon. "Belinda, please," Richard begged, his voice pulling me back to the present. "I need everything you have. I need the security footage. I need the text messages. I need the proof of the forged medical documents. If I can prove Jessica is a manipulative fraud, maybe my lawyer can argue Susan was coerced into signing those guarantor forms. You said you built a timeline. Send it to me right now. I need you to help me fix this." He wanted my evidence folder. He wanted the digital vault I spent the last 2 days building. He expected me to drop my vacation, step into his nightmare, and play the role of the family savior. For 28 years, that was my exact job description. Whenever the flames got too high, Richard and Susan threw me into the fire to put it out. I thought about the electric bill Jessica opened in my name. I thought about the collection agency threatening my credit score. I remembered standing in the kitchen asking my father for support. He handed me a check, told me to stay quiet, and warned me not to ruin Jessica's future. He dismissed my pain to protect her. Now that his own wallet was burning, he suddenly cared about justice. I reached out and picked up the phone, turning off the speaker setting. I brought the device close to my mouth. "No," I said. The single syllable sliced through his panic. "What do you mean, no?" he stammered. "We are losing everything. You have the proof. You have the timeline. You have to help me." I took a deep, steadying breath. "I am cooperating with the state authorities," I explained, keeping my tone measured and calm. "I sent my evidence to Child Protective Services. I sent the fraud details to the police. The law will handle Jessica, but I am not getting involved in your marital finances." "Belinda, you cannot do this," he pleaded. "We are family." I closed my eyes. The ocean breeze felt cool against my skin. "You told me family comes first," I reminded him, repeating the exact words he used to command me to cancel my trip just 3 days ago. "You told me respectable families solve their problems privately. You ordered me to stay silent when she stole my identity. You enabled her every step of the way. You created this monster. Now you handle it." I did not wait for a response. I pressed the end button. The screen went dark. A powerful shift in dynamics occurred in that exact moment. The system that governed my entire existence fractured and dissolved. My parents spent decades forcing me to absorb the impact of Jessica's reckless behavior. They used guilt and obligation as invisible chains to keep me compliant. Now those chains were gone. The enablers were finally drowning in the deep waters they ignored for years. My father's previous arrogance was replaced by sudden, crushing exhaustion. He realized he possessed no leverage over me. He could not yell, threaten, or manipulate his way out of this crisis. He was trapped in a house with a wife who lied to him, facing down corporate lawyers, while his favored daughter sipped cocktails in Cabo. I placed the phone inside the bedside drawer and slid it shut. I looked at Sarah. She offered a small, proud smile. We grabbed our sunglasses and walked out of the cabin, leaving the Nevada desert and my family's financial distress far behind us. The cruise awaited, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free to enjoy it. Yet the story was far from over. Jessica still had to return from her secret getaway, and she was stepping into a trap she built herself. The peace on the ship lasted exactly 1 day before my phone screen lit up with a new disaster. Sarah and I were sitting by the pool listening to the steel drum band play in the background. The Caribbean sun warmed my skin. I took a sip of iced tea, trying to forget the sound of my father crying over his drained retirement account. Then a text message from David arrived. He did not say hello. He just delivered the facts. "Jessica is back in Nevada," David wrote. I sat up straight, nearly spilling my drink. I stared at the message. She was supposed to be in Mexico for 5 days. It was only Saturday morning. Her secret luxury getaway ended 3 days early. I typed a quick reply asking him what happened. David responded a few seconds later. "Her rich boyfriend got caught," David explained. "His wife saw a pending charge for a private villa in Cabo San Lucas on their joint credit card statement. She froze his accounts and threatened to file for divorce. Trent dumped your sister at the airport terminal and flew back to beg for forgiveness. She had to buy her own coach ticket home." A cold sense of justice washed over me. Jessica built her entire life around using other people for financial gain. She abandoned her own children on my freezing porch just to maintain her wealthy boyfriend's illusion. Now that same man discarded her the second his own comfort was threatened. She flew back to the desert with nothing. But a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. When Jessica landed in Nevada, she faced a harsh reality check. She drove straight to David's apartment to demand her children back. She assumed she could just flash a tearful smile, offer a fake excuse about a delayed flight, and resume her role as the primary parent. She did not know David already held an emergency custody order signed by a family court judge. When she started pounding on his front door, David did not open it. He simply slid a copy of the legal paperwork under the doorframe and told her to leave before he called the police. Locked out of her children's lives, unemployed, and facing a looming criminal investigation, my sister panicked. She needed to regain control of the narrative. She needed a scapegoat. 10 minutes later, my phone began vibrating nonstop. Notifications flooded the top of my screen. They were not texts from Jessica. They were alerts from a social media app. Sarah noticed my posture stiffen and leaned over to look. "She is going public," Sarah warned. I opened the application. Jessica had just uploaded a long emotional post. The attached photo showed her sitting in her car, her makeup smeared her eyes red from crying. She looked like the ultimate victim. The caption beneath the image was a masterclass in manipulation. "I am going through the darkest mental health crisis of my life," Jessica wrote. "I suffered a severe panic attack yesterday morning. I experienced a minor childcare miscommunication because my brain just shut down from exhaustion. I thought I left my beautiful babies with trusted family. Instead, a jealous, childless relative used my moment of weakness to steal my children away from me. This person exploited a simple mistake for their own sick revenge. Please pray for my family." I read the words 3 times. My hands began to shake. The sheer audacity took my breath away. She transformed a calculated act of child abandonment into a mental health crisis. She rebranded leaving 2 shivering kids in 40-degree weather as a minor miscommunication. And most infuriating of all, she painted me as a bitter, childless villain who stole her family out of spite. She did not use my name, but everyone in our hometown knew exactly who she meant. Jessica always resented my independence. When we were younger, she constantly belittled my career goals, claiming true women focused on raising a family. She viewed my lack of children not as a personal choice, but as a flaw. Now she weaponized that choice to discredit me in front of our entire community. The strategy worked instantly. Extended family members, high school friends, and local church acquaintances flooded the comment section with sympathy. They praised her bravery for speaking out about her struggles. Then, the private text messages began rolling in. My Aunt Barbara was the first to attack. She sent me a long paragraph. "I cannot believe you are sitting on a luxury cruise while your sister is suicidal," Barbara wrote. "You should be ashamed of yourself. Vacations can be rescheduled, Belinda. Children remember betrayal forever. You need to drop the charges and give those kids back to their mother." Another message arrived from my cousin Mark. It was shorter, but just as cruel. He called me heartless. He accused me of punishing a struggling single mom just because I wanted to drink margaritas on a beach. The injustice burned a hole right through my chest. These people did not see the security camera footage. They did not know she forged my signature on medical documents. They did not know she embezzled $12,000 from a children's hospital to fund a secret affair. They only saw a crying mother on a screen. My family always rushed to comfort Jessica because her lies were easier to digest than the ugly truth. I opened the keyboard on my phone. My fingers hovered over the letters. I wanted to scream. I wanted to write a massive public response detailing every single crime she committed over the last decade. I wanted to post the video of little Leo wrapping his jacket around Mia. I wanted to burn her fake reputation to ashes so everyone could see the monster hiding underneath. I typed the first sentence. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand flat over my screen. "Do not type a single word," Sarah commanded. Her voice held the strict authority of a seasoned fraud investigator. "You are playing right into her hands." I looked up, my vision blurred with angry tears. "I have to defend myself," I argued. "Everyone thinks I stole her kids." Sarah shook her head. "That is exactly what she wants, Belinda. She is starving for a reaction. Narcissists feed on your emotional responses. If you reply, you validate her narrative. You turn this into a petty online feud between 2 sisters. People will stop caring about the facts and just focus on the drama. You need to remain silent. Silence is a weapon she does not know how to fight." I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. Sarah was right. Any public defense I mounted would only give Jessica more ammunition to play the victim. If I posted the security video, she would claim I was violating her privacy. If I mentioned the fraud, she would accuse me of slander. The court of public opinion was rigged. I needed to fight her in a real court. I deleted the sentence I had typed. I closed the keyboard. Take screenshots of everything Sarah instructed, pulling her hand away. Capture the comments, save the timestamps. She just admitted in writing that she left the kids unattended. She called it a miscommunication, but a judge will call it a confession. I spent the next hour documenting the smear campaign. I saved Aunt Barbara's text messages. I captured Cousin Mark's insults. I took high-resolution screenshots of Jessica's crying selfie and her manipulative caption. Every time she replied to a comment claiming David was an unfit father, I saved it. She was handing me a loaded gun, one post at a time. I opened my email application. I attached the digital files to a new message addressed to Angela Ruiz, the state caseworker. I drafted a second identical email and sent it to David so he could forward it to his custody lawyer. The attorney responded within 10 minutes. His reply was short and victorious. "Please tell your sister to keep posting," the lawyer wrote. "She is doing my job for me. These screenshots prove she lacks basic accountability and is actively attempting to alienate the children from their father. We will present this to the judge on Monday." I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. The urge to fight back publicly faded, replaced by a cold, tactical patience. I decided to let Jessica punch the air. My silence drove my sister insane. Over the next 6 hours, Jessica uploaded 3 more posts. Without a response from me, her narrative began to unravel. She grew sloppy. In her second post, she claimed she never left the driveway until she saw me wave from the window. That directly contradicted her first post about a scheduling error. In her third post, she uploaded a rambling video where she blamed her former employer for ruining her life, claiming the charity auction funds were stolen by a coworker and she was being framed. She threw blame in every direction, desperate to see what would stick. She did not realize her online flailing was serving as a public confession of her own instability. The legal noose tightened with every word she typed. But her reckless video pointing fingers at her former logistics firm triggered a consequence she never anticipated. By publicly accusing her old co-workers of theft, she woke up a sleeping giant. The junior accountant she tried to frame saw the video, and that accountant was no longer willing to wait for the police to take action. The steel drum music from the pool deck faded into the background as I stared at the frozen frame of my sister's latest online video. Jessica had crossed a dangerous line. In her frantic attempt to deflect blame, she publicly accused her former employer of setting her up. She claimed a junior accountant at the logistics firm orchestrated the theft of the charity funds. She pointed her finger at an innocent woman to save her own skin. That arrogant decision sealed her fate. My phone chimed with a new email notification. The sender name read Lisa Vance. I recognized the name immediately. Lisa was the junior accountant Jessica just tried to throw under the bus in front of our entire hometown. I opened the message. The tone of the email carried cold, calculated fury. Lisa did not type a greeting. She went straight to the point. "Your sister just made a very big mistake," Lisa wrote. "She thinks she can use me as her scapegoat because I am young and new to the firm. She told the corporate auditors I made a data entry error. Now she is telling the internet I stole the money. But I do not make errors, Belinda. I keep receipts." I sat up straight in my lounge chair. Sarah noticed the shift in my posture and leaned closer. I read the rest of the email aloud. Lisa explained that when Jessica was fired 2 weeks ago, the company locked my sister out of the internal servers, but Lisa had already noticed discrepancies in the charity auction ledgers months prior. Fearing she might get blamed for her supervisor's sloppy tracks, Lisa quietly created personal backup copies of the digital transaction logs. She saved everything on a secure flash drive long before the auditors even arrived. "Scroll down," Sarah instructed, pointing at the screen. "Look at the attachments." I swiped down. Lisa had attached a series of PDF documents. The first file contained a chain of internal corporate emails. I zoomed in on the text. The messages were sent directly from Jessica's verified company email address. The timestamps dated back to the exact week the charity auction funds went missing. In the emails, Jessica explicitly ordered Lisa to bypass the standard banking protocols. She instructed the junior accountant to route $12,000 meant for the children's hospital into a third-party vendor account. Lisa replied to that specific email, questioning the strange request and asking for vendor verification. Jessica responded an hour later with a harsh reprimand, telling Lisa to stop asking questions and process the transfer immediately or face disciplinary action. Jessica left a documented digital trail of her own embezzlement. She used her authority to force a subordinate to execute the theft. The second attachment was a bank routing trace. Lisa managed to pull the destination details for the dummy vendor account. The routing number matched a private digital payment account registered to Jessica's personal email address. It was the same email address she used for her social media profiles. The defense she tried to build online was dead. She could never claim this was a simple accounting error. The paperwork proved premeditated corporate fraud. Then I opened the final attachment. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a high-resolution photograph. Lisa included a screenshot taken from the social media page of a local yacht charter company. The timestamp on the picture matched the exact afternoon the $12,000 landed in Jessica's private account. The photo showed my sister standing on the deck of a rented luxury boat. She wore a designer swimsuit and held a glass of champagne. Trent, the wealthy, married real estate developer, stood right beside her with his arm wrapped around her waist. They were celebrating. They threw a private yacht party using money meant for sick children. My stomach churned. The sheer evil of her actions felt suffocating. She stole from a hospital, drained my parents' retirement savings, abandoned her own kids on a freezing porch, and then smiled for a camera while drinking expensive wine. "This is a silver bullet," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. "If you give this to the state caseworker and the charity lawyers, Jessica is done. She will not just lose custody, she will face serious prison time. You need to forward this right now." I downloaded the files to my secure folder. I opened a new email draft addressed to Angela Ruiz at Child Protective Services, David's custody lawyer, and the corporate attorney representing the defrauded hospital. I attached the ledgers, the email chains, the routing numbers, and the yacht photo. I was seconds away from pressing send. My phone screen shifted abruptly. An incoming call blocked the email draft. The caller ID showed my mother. I took a deep breath and answered. Susan did not sound angry this time. She sounded shattered. Her voice trembled thick with tears and sheer panic. "Belinda, please tell me you are listening," my mother begged. "I am here," I replied. Susan started talking fast, her words tumbling over each other. She had seen Jessica's online video. She knew the situation was spiraling out of control. The corporate lawyers were threatening to put a lien on my parents' house because Susan co-signed those guarantor loans. They were on the verge of losing everything. "I just got off the phone with our own lawyer," Susan cried. "He told us the only way we can save our house is if the charity drops the civil suit, and the charity will only drop the suit if they cannot prove Jessica took the money intentionally. If they think it was just a corporate mistake, they might settle through insurance." I stared at the ocean, gripping the phone. "What are you asking me to do?" I asked, though I already knew. My mother let out a desperate sob. "I know you have been talking to people back home. I know David is building a case against her. If you have any more evidence, you have to bury it. You cannot send anything else to the authorities. If you prove she did this on purpose, they will press criminal charges. Your sister will go to prison. You have to stop." The silence hung between us heavy and thick. My mother was asking me to participate in the cover-up. She wanted me to hide felony evidence to save her suburban house and keep her favorite daughter out of a jail cell. She was willing to let a children's hospital lose $12,000 just to maintain her comfortable illusion. I thought about the last 28 years. I thought about all the times I was told to be the bigger person. I remembered paying off that fraudulent electric bill while my father ordered me to stay quiet. I remembered the endless guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, and the constant demand that I sacrifice my own peace to clean up Jessica's wreckage. I looked at the email draft minimizing on my screen. The truth was sitting right there waiting to be delivered. "No," I told my mother. The word felt powerful. It felt permanent. "Belinda, she is your sister," Susan wailed. "How can you do this to your own family? We are begging you. If you send them more proof, you are destroying her life." I did not destroy her life. I kept my voice firm and steady. She ruined it the second she stole that money. She ruined it when she left Leo and Mia in the cold. You are asking me to protect a thief. Protecting a criminal is not an act of love. It is just a delay of the inevitable. You are choosing a hospital over your own flesh and blood. Susan accused her grief, morphing back into familiar manipulation. "I am choosing the truth," I answered. "The truth does not care about our family name." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I did not wait for her to formulate another guilt trip. I pressed the red button to end the call. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened the minimized email draft containing the whistleblower evidence from the junior accountant. The ledgers, the emails, the yacht photos. I pressed send. The files flew through the digital space, landing directly on the desks of the state authorities and the corporate lawyers. The truth was now an unstoppable force. I could not pull it back even if I wanted to. The avalanche had started, and it was heading straight for Nevada. I set the phone down and let out a long, slow breath. The relief was profound. I had severed the final string connecting me to their toxic system, but the fallout was imminent. Jessica still believed she could talk her way out of the mess. She still thought she could manipulate the legal system the same way she manipulated our parents. She had no idea that the trap she set for me had reversed its mechanism. The authorities were reviewing the documents at this very moment, and the reality she was about to face would strip away every lie she ever told. Monday morning arrived with a bright Caribbean sunrise. The cruise ship glided through calm turquoise waters. I sat on the private balcony of my cabin holding a cup of hot tea, watching the horizon. Thousands of miles away in a Nevada courthouse, a family judge prepared to review the wreckage my sister left behind. I kept my phone resting on the small glass table beside me. I knew the emergency custody hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I did not have to wait long for the results. David called me just before noon. His voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and profound relief. The legal system had moved with surprising efficiency. David described the scene inside the courtroom. He sat at the plaintiff table with his attorney. Jessica sat across the aisle looking disheveled and frantic. She assumed she could talk her way out of the consequences. She planned to play the victim and blame her actions on a temporary lapse in judgment. But the judge did not want to hear a sob story. The judge wanted to see the evidence. David explained how the courtroom fell dead silent when his lawyer played the security footage from my porch. The judge watched Jessica march her children up to my locked door in 43-degree weather. The magistrate saw her look directly into the camera lens, lie to her son, and walk away. Then the second video played. The judge watched 9-year-old Leo strip off his own jacket to keep little Mia warm while they sat abandoned on the concrete. Jessica tried to interrupt the video. She tried to tell the court she thought I was inside. The judge silenced her with a single strike of the gavel. Her defense crumbled before she could even finish her sentence. The caseworker, Angela Ruiz, stepped forward next. She presented the forged temporary medical authorization forms. She handed the judge the yellow sticky note proving Jessica planned the entire abandonment around my prepaid vacation. The ruling was swift and unforgiving. The judge stripped Jessica of her primary custody rights. David was granted full, immediate legal and physical custody of Leo and Mia. My sister was restricted to supervised visitation only. She could not see her own children without a state-approved monitor present in the room. Her primary weapon was officially confiscated. She could no longer use my niece and nephew as leverage to manipulate our family. But the family court ruling was only the first wall to close in on her. The overlapping conflicts she created began detonating one by one. While Jessica stood before the judge, her wealthy boyfriend made his final move. Trent realized the severity of the situation. His wife had seen the yacht photos forwarded by the whistleblower at the logistics firm. His marriage was on the brink of a lucrative divorce settlement. Rich men rarely sacrifice their assets for a secret affair. Trent chose his bank accounts over my sister. He changed his personal cell phone number. He instructed the security guards at his real estate development firm to ban Jessica from the premises. When she tried to call him for comfort after losing custody, she hit a disconnected line. Her romantic fallback plan evaporated into thin air. Trent erased her from his existence, leaving her stranded without a dime of support. The financial reality of her choices caught up with her by Monday afternoon. The charity lawyers reviewed the ledgers and the email chains I forwarded. They did not care about her mental health excuses. They saw a clear, documented case of corporate theft. The hospital board refused to settle the matter privately. They officially filed a criminal police report for embezzlement. A detective was assigned to the case, and a warrant for her arrest was being drafted. With her job gone, her rich boyfriend vanished, and a criminal probe looming, Jessica drove back to her luxury apartment. She expected to walk inside, lock the door, and hide from the world. Instead, she found a bright orange piece of paper taped to her front door. It was a 3-day pay or quit eviction notice. Her landlord had not received the rent payment for the month. Jessica always relied on my mother to cover the deficit whenever she spent her paycheck on designer clothes. But this time the safety net was gone. Panicking, Jessica grabbed her phone and dialed our parents' house. She expected Susan to transfer the funds immediately. She demanded a rescue. The rescue never came. Richard answered the phone. My father had spent the weekend combing through decades of bank statements, uncovering the exact depth of the financial betrayal. He realized Susan had drained $30,000 from their joint retirement to fund Jessica's glamorous lies. Richard finally woke up from his long slumber of denial. He recognized that feeding the monster only made it hungrier. My father told me what happened next during a brief cold phone call later that evening. Richard explained that when Susan tried to grab the checkbook to pay Jessica's landlord, he stepped in front of the door. He blocked her path. He told my mother he had spent the morning at the local bank branch. He froze all their shared checking and savings accounts. He moved the remaining retirement funds into a sole proprietorship account under his name only. Susan screamed at him. She cried that Jessica would be sleeping on the streets. She begged him to authorize one final transfer to save the apartment. Richard refused. He looked his wife in the eye and delivered an ultimatum. He told Susan that if she gave their oldest daughter another single dollar, he would file divorce papers the very next morning. He promised to sell the house, split the remaining assets, and leave her to drown in the debt she co-signed. The threat worked. Susan loved her country club lifestyle and her comfortable suburban home more than she loved protecting a criminal. Forced to choose between her own financial survival and Jessica's rent, my mother finally dropped the safety net. She backed down, weeping on the kitchen floor, while Richard hung up the phone on Jessica's desperate pleas. For the very first time in her 28 years of life, my sister found herself entirely alone. She had no enablers left to pay her bills. She had no scapegoat left to absorb the blame. She had no children left to weaponize for sympathy. Every single lie she told had been exposed. The charity knew she was a thief. The police knew she was a forger. The family court knew she was an unfit parent. Jessica designed this entire crisis to punish me. She left those kids on my porch to force me into submission. She wanted to ruin my hard-earned vacation and prove that she controlled my destiny. She banked on my ingrained sense of obligation. But my simple refusal to cancel a flight triggered a chain reaction that dismantled her entire fraudulent existence. I sat on the balcony of the cruise ship, feeling the warm ocean breeze brush against my face. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting vibrant shades of orange and purple across the water. Sarah walked out onto the deck, holding 2 tall glasses filled with ice and fresh lemonade. She handed one to me and sat in the chair beside mine. "Did you hear from the mainland?" Sarah asked, looking out at the waves. "I heard everything," I answered. I took a sip of the cold drink. A profound, quiet peace settled deep into my bones. The anxiety that governed my youth was completely gone. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel responsible for the wreckage back in Nevada. The toxic system that ruled my family for decades had finally collapsed under its own corrupt weight. By simply walking away, I allowed the natural consequences of my sister's actions to catch her. I survived the disappointment of my parents, and in doing so, I protected my future. The legal trap had snapped shut. There was no escaping the reality she created. But even as I enjoyed the sunset, I knew there would be one final confrontation. Jessica would not go quietly into the night. When cornered animals realize they have nowhere left to run, they always lash out one last time. And I would be ready for her when I returned home. The flight back to the desert felt remarkably brief. Sarah and I landed late Sunday evening, leaving the humid ocean air behind for the dry heat of Henderson. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the quiet hallway of my own home. Everything remained exactly as I left it. The air smelled of lemon polish and stale dust. I unpacked my suitcase, ran a hot shower, and slept for 9 uninterrupted hours. The nightmare I left behind seemed distant, locked away in police reports and family court files. I woke up feeling deeply refreshed, enjoying a quiet morning coffee on my patio. Monday afternoon delivered a harsh dose of reality. I sat at the kitchen island organizing my upcoming work schedule when a violent series of thumps vibrated through the floorboards. Someone hammered their fists against the heavy wood of my entryway. I did not walk toward the foyer. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the security application. The software buffered for a fraction of a second before displaying the live feed. My sister stood on the porch. She looked nothing like the glamorous event planner who boarded a flight to Cabo San Lucas just a few days ago. Her expensive blonde highlights appeared tangled and greasy, hanging limp around her pale face. She wore a stained gray hooded sweatshirt and loose sweatpants. Dark, heavy circles bruised the delicate skin beneath her eyes. She gripped the handles of two massive black garbage bags, presumably stuffed with whatever belongings she managed to grab before her landlord locked the apartment doors. "Open up!" Jessica screamed, slamming her bare palm against the decorative glass panel. "I know you are in there, Belinda. Your car is parked outside. Let me inside right now." A sharp pang of pity hit my chest. It was a conditioned reflex built over 2 decades of intense conditioning. When we were younger, Jessica frequently sneaked out to attend dangerous parties. She always returned at dawn, crying about some boy who broke her heart or a friend who betrayed her trust. I always unlocked the back window, patched up her scraped knees, and lied to our parents to keep her out of severe trouble. Seeing her stand there looking so pathetic triggered that ancient instinct to rescue my older sibling from her own terrible choices. But then my mind flashed back to the manila envelope she shoved under my welcome mat. I remembered the forged cursive signature at the bottom of the state medical authorization forms. She committed felony identity theft to force me into legal liability for her abandoned children, all while she drank expensive champagne on a private yacht using stolen charity funds. The temporary pity vanished entirely, replaced by cold, hardened steel. I pressed the microphone icon on my digital screen. "You need to leave this property," I said. My voice echoed through the outdoor speaker, startling her. She jumped backward, dropping one of the garbage bags, and looked up at the small black lens mounted near the porch light. She quickly recovered her footing and marched closer to the camera. "You destroyed my life," Jessica yelled. Her features twisted into an ugly, unrecognizable mask of pure resentment. "David took my babies away. The property manager changed the locks on my apartment. Trent will not answer any of my calls. I have nowhere else to go. You must let me stay in your guest room until I figure this situation out." I stared at the glowing monitor. She genuinely believed she was a victim of circumstance. She accepted zero personal accountability for the corporate embezzlement, the document forgery, or the child endangerment. She categorized every single devastating consequence as a malicious attack launched by someone else to ruin her happiness. "I will not open this door," I answered, keeping my tone perfectly flat. Jessica gripped the plastic handles of her luggage. "I am your sister," she cried, attempting to squeeze out a few desperate tears. "You cannot just leave me on the street. I have zero cash. Mom and Dad refused to answer their home phone. Richard froze the bank accounts this morning. You are the only person I have left in this world. I just need a warm place to sleep for a few nights while I secure a new job." I watched her perform through the digital feed. The weeping was a highly calculated tactic, a theatrical performance, designed specifically to wear down my emotional boundaries. She expected me to cave under the pressure of family loyalty, but I was no longer a participant in her toxic game. I laid out the new permanent rules of our relationship through the intercom system. "Listen to me very carefully," I instructed. "There will be no more cash transfers or secret loans. There will be no surprise babysitting arrangements. You will never have physical access to this house again. I am entirely done fixing your disasters. You need to contact a local women's shelter or seek out a halfway house program because you are not crossing this threshold today, tomorrow, or ever again." The fake crying stopped instantly. The sorrow vanished from her face, replaced by venomous, unhinged rage. "You ungrateful brat!" Jessica shrieked, kicking the bottom of my front door with her heavy boots. "Family is supposed to forgive mistakes. We are supposed to stand by each other during difficult times. You are throwing me away over a minor miscommunication?" "Leaving your children in the freezing desert cold is not a miscommunication," I replied, refusing to raise my voice. "It is a severe crime. Forging my name on legal contracts is a felony. Stealing $12,000 from a children's hospital is an act of pure evil. Real family tells the truth. Real family holds each other accountable for their destructive actions. I will not harbor a known thief." She opened her mouth to scream another vicious insult, but the syllables died in her throat. She stared at the camera lens, her eyes widening in horrific realization. The blood drained from her cheeks. She finally understood that I possessed all the hidden evidence. I knew about the charity money. I knew about the yacht pictures. I knew about the forged signature. The false narrative she spent years perfecting was completely dead. The designated person she always relied on to absorb the impact of her toxic choices was gone forever. The live security feed recorded every single second of her emotional meltdown. I saved the video file directly to my secure digital vault. If she attempted to break a window or physically damage the property, I now possess the exact video proof the police would require to issue a permanent restraining order against her. Jessica dropped her remaining bag onto the concrete. She slumped against the brick exterior wall, sliding down until she sat flat on the hard ground. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with genuine, terrifying panic. She was entirely broken. The power dynamic between us shifted permanently in that exact moment. She could no longer weaponize my empathy. I prepared to disconnect the audio feed and call the local authorities to have her formally removed for trespassing. I tapped the screen, ready to end the interaction completely. Suddenly, the motion sensor chimed a second time. Another vehicle pulled into my driveway, parking directly behind my parked sedan. I recognized the silver luxury sport utility vehicle immediately. My parents had arrived. Richard and Susan stepped out of their car. My mother looked pale and completely exhausted. Her posture slumped under the crushing weight of the impending civil lawsuits. My father walked with stiff, aggressive strides. They had ignored Jessica's desperate phone calls all morning long, but the moment they realized she was cornering me at my own residence, they drove over to intervene. The final pieces of our fractured family were congregating on my front lawn, setting the perfect stage for an explosive confrontation that would shatter their remaining illusions for good. Richard parked his silver sport utility vehicle directly behind my sedan. The tires crunched against the hot gravel of my driveway. He turned off the engine, but neither of my parents stepped out immediately. I watched them through the security camera feed. They sat behind the windshield, staring at my older sister sitting on the concrete beside her black garbage bags. The pristine illusion they spent decades building was officially dead, and the wreckage was currently camped on my front lawn. My father finally pushed his door open. He looked 10 years older than the man who ordered me to cancel my cruise just a week prior. His shoulders sagged. The sharp, commanding energy he always carried had evaporated, drained away by the crushing reality of corporate lawyers and frozen retirement accounts. Susan followed him out of the passenger side. My mother looked frail. Her usual perfect posture was gone. She clutched her leather purse against her chest like a shield. She walked slowly up the concrete path toward the porch, her eyes darting nervously around the neighborhood to see if any of my neighbors were watching the spectacle. Jessica scrambled to her feet the moment Susan approached. She threw her arms out, immediately reverting to the role of the helpless victim. "Mom, you have to tell her to open the door," Jessica cried, pointing a trembling finger at the camera lens. "She is locking me out. I have zero money. The landlord changed my locks. I just need to sleep in her spare room until I can fix this. You have to make her listen to reason." Susan looked at the heavy wooden door. She stepped closer to the intercom speaker. She knew I was watching. She knew I was listening. Despite the staggering amount of evidence proving Jessica was a manipulative criminal, my mother still tried to play her designated role. The habit of enabling was stitched deep into her bones. She could not comprehend a reality where we did not sacrifice ourselves to shield her favorite child. "Belinda, please," Susan said into the microphone. Her voice cracked, laced with desperate pleading. "I know you are angry. I know she made terrible choices, but she is your sister. She is standing outside in the heat. Just let her sleep on your couch for a few nights. We will figure everything out tomorrow. You cannot just turn your back on family when they hit rock bottom." I stood inside my quiet kitchen listening to the audio feed. My mother was asking me to invite a woman who forged my signature and abandoned her children into my safe space. She wanted me to absorb the chaos so she would not have to deal with the guilt of leaving her daughter on the street. I did not press the microphone button to argue. Arguing implied a negotiation, and my boundaries were no longer up for debate. I walked over to the small desk in the corner of my living room. I opened my laptop and ran a quick internet search. I found the contact information for 3 local women's shelters in the Henderson area. I added the address for a county-sponsored temporary housing program that offered emergency beds for displaced adults. I sent the document to my wireless printer, the machine whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of crisp white paper. I folded the paper in half. I walked to the front entryway. I did not unlock the deadbolt. I knelt on the floor and pushed the folded document through the brass mail slot installed near the bottom of the door. The paper fluttered onto the porch landing, right near my mother's shoes. Susan stared down at the document. Jessica snatched it off the ground. She unfolded the page and read the printed addresses. Her face contorted into a mask of pure indignation. "Shelters!" Jessica yelled, her voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. "You expect me to sleep in a homeless shelter? I am not a charity case. I am a professional." "You are an unemployed felon facing a corporate lawsuit," I said, finally pressing the intercom button. "Those programs have beds, hot food, and social workers who can help you. They also have strict rules, curfews, and mandatory accountability meetings. That is the only help I am offering." Jessica ripped the paper into pieces and threw the shreds onto the lawn. She turned her fury away from the locked door and aimed it directly at our mother. "Why are you just standing there?" Jessica screamed at Susan. "Do something! Tell her to open the door! You are the parent! You are supposed to fix this!" Susan flinched, taking a physical step backward. "I cannot fix this," she whispered, tears spilling over her eyelashes. "Your father froze the bank accounts. The charity is threatening to put a lien on our house because I signed your guarantor paperwork. We have nothing left to give you." Jessica did not care about our parents' financial ruin. She only cared that her primary resource had dried up. She lashed out, desperate and vicious. "You promised me," Yourself shrieked, her voice carrying a terrifying, unhinged edge. "You told me she would back down. You promised she would cancel her trip. You said she always caves if we push hard enough." The Nevada wind seemed to stop blowing. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the front yard. Susan stopped crying. She stood perfectly still, staring at her oldest daughter. "What did you just say?" my mother asked, her voice dropping to a hollow whisper. Jessica realized her mistake a second too late, but she was too angry to stop talking. "You told me she would never get on that plane if the kids were involved," she continued, digging her own grave. "You said you would handle her. You said my Cabo trip was safe." Susan stared at Jessica as if looking at a stranger. The ultimate betrayal clicked into place, fracturing the final remnants of my mother's denial. When the police called Susan on the morning of my flight, my mother rushed to the station. She lied to law enforcement. She claimed Jessica suffered a sudden panic attack. She provided a fake alibi about a Denver retreat. Susan risked a criminal charge for lying to the police because she truly believed Jessica acted out of spontaneous desperation. "You told me the children were with a sitter that morning," Susan said, her voice shaking with a new, terrifying clarity. Jessica crossed her arms, refusing to break eye contact. "The sitter canceled at the last minute." "That is a lie," Susan replied. The words sounded foreign coming from her mouth. "You planned this. You planned to dump them on Belinda's porch. You calculated her reaction, and you used my advice to do it. You used me." For 28 years, Susan operated under the delusion that Jessica just needed a little more help, a little more love, and a little more money. My mother willingly sacrificed my happiness to secure Jessica's comfort. But in that defining moment on my front lawn, Susan finally understood the dark truth. Jessica did not love her. Jessica viewed our mother the exact same way she viewed me. We were not family to her. We were tools. We were disposable resources to be manipulated, drained, and discarded the moment we stopped serving her needs. "You looked me in the eye and swore you secured overnight childcare," Susan continued, her tone hardening into something resembling actual spine. "You let me lie to a police officer. You let me drain $30,000 from your father's retirement account to pay your rent while you bought designer clothes and took secret vacations with a married man. You endangered your own children just to prove you could control your sister." Jessica rolled her eyes, a gesture of profound disrespect. "Stop being dramatic, Mom. I just need a place to stay." Richard stepped forward. He had remained silent the entire time, watching his wife finally confront the monster they built together. He walked past Susan, grabbed the shredded pieces of the shelter list off the grass, and shoved them into Jessica's hands. "You have your options," Richard said. his voice cold and resolute. "Call a shelter."
"Dad, you cannot do this," Jessica pleaded, her arrogant facade cracking as she realized he was serious. "Watch me," Richard answered. He turned his back on her. He looked at Susan, jerking his head toward the parked vehicle. "Get in the car, Susan. We are leaving." Susan looked at Jessica one last time. The golden child illusion was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a woman who felt no remorse for the destruction she caused. My mother turned around and walked slowly back down the driveway. She opened the passenger door and climbed inside, never looking back at the porch. Richard started the engine. He shifted the car into reverse and backed out into the street. The silver vehicle drove away, turning the corner and disappearing from sight. The toxic triangle was permanently broken. Jessica stood alone on my concrete walkway. She held the torn pieces of paper in her fist. She looked at the empty street, then turned her gaze back to the security camera. There were no tears left. There was only the harsh, unforgiving glare of a reality she could no longer manipulate. She possessed no money, no home, no children, and no enablers. I watched the screen as she slowly bent down, picked up her 2 black garbage bags, and began walking down the sidewalk under the brutal afternoon sun. I pressed the power button on my monitor. The screen faded to black. I stood in the quiet comfort of my own home, feeling the solid floor beneath my feet. The boundary survived the ultimate test of guilt tears and parental pressure. I did not set myself on fire to keep her warm. I drew a line in the sand, and the storm broke itself against it. 6 months passed. The blistering Nevada summer surrendered to a crisp autumn breeze. I parked my sedan in front of a modest townhouse on the quiet side of Henderson. The front yard held 2 bicycles and a small plastic soccer net. I walked up the driveway holding a white bakery box tied with string. David opened the front door before I even raised my hand to knock. He wore faded jeans and a local sports team baseball cap. A genuine, relaxed smile touched his eyes. "Come on in, Belinda," he said, stepping aside to let me pass. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the kitchen. Leo sat at the dining table finishing a math worksheet. Mia colored a picture on the living room floor. Neither child flinched when the front door closed. They did not scan the room waiting for the next adult meltdown. The chronic heavy fear they carried on my concrete porch was gone. David provided a stable, predictable routine. His apartment lacked expensive designer furniture, but it offered something much better. It offered safety. I handed the bakery box to Leo. He opened the cardboard lid, revealing 4 chocolate cupcakes. "Thank you, Aunt Belinda," he said, his posture easy and comfortable. I visited them every other Sunday. I bypassed my sister entirely to maintain my relationship with my niece and nephew. I did not need her permission to love them. The state family court granted David permanent primary custody last month. The judge reviewed the evidence of her child endangerment and stripped her of all overnight visitation rights. Jessica did not attend that final custody hearing. She was busy sitting in a criminal courtroom, dealing with the charity fraud charges. The hospital board pushed for maximum penalties, refusing to settle the matter quietly. My sister hired a public defender because our father refused to pay for a private attorney. Faced with the mountain of digital ledgers, emails, and yacht photos, her defense lawyer advised her to surrender. She accepted a strict plea deal to avoid a federal prison sentence. The judge ordered her to pay heavy financial restitution. She owed the charity $12,000 plus court fees and fines. The state also placed her on supervised probation for 5 years. She lost her luxury apartment the same week she stood screaming on my front lawn. Today, she lives in a state-mandated halfway house located on the industrial edge of town. The program enforces strict rules. She must obey a 9 o'clock curfew, attend mandatory financial counseling sessions, and submit to random inspections. She works 40 hours a week at a logistics packing warehouse. It is grueling minimum wage labor. She spends 8 hours a day taping cardboard boxes shut on a noisy concrete assembly line. Her designer clothes are gone, replaced by steel-toe boots and a neon safety vest. I drove past the industrial park a few weeks ago and saw her waiting at a public bus stop, holding a cheap plastic thermos. The glamour she stole from others vanished. She works hard just to afford basic necessities and pay her monthly court restitution. The universe finally forced her to live an honest life.
My parents faced their own harsh reckoning. Susan and Richard sold their large suburban home in December. They downsized to a small two-bedroom condominium to avoid total bankruptcy. The $30,000 Susan drained from the retirement fund crippled their golden years. The corporate lawyers dropped the civil suit against my mother only after Jessica signed the criminal plea deal. But the legal defense fees still cost my parents a fortune. Richard postponed his retirement indefinitely. He picked up extra weekend shifts at his consulting firm just to keep their heads above water. Susan spent a weekend hosting a garage sale, selling her expensive patio furniture and fine china just to cover their new living expenses. They attend intense marital counseling twice a week. Susan spends her sessions learning how her desperate need to maintain a perfect public image nearly destroyed her marriage. The country club memberships were canceled. The fancy dinner parties ended. The truth humbled them. Last week, Richard invited me to a local diner for breakfast. We sat in a faded vinyl booth, drinking bitter black coffee. He looked at me, tracing the rim of his ceramic mug with his thumb. "I am sorry, Belinda," he said. His voice carried a quiet, authentic regret. "I demanded you cancel your life to fix her crimes. I treated your future like a backup fund for her mistakes. I used the phrase, 'family comes first,' as a weapon to make you comply. I failed to protect you." I nodded, accepting the apology, without offering empty comfort. Forgiveness takes time, and trust requires a long track record of changed behavior. We are slowly rebuilding our relationship, but the foundation is different now. We talk about my career. We talk about his new hobbies. We do not discuss Jessica or her manufactured emergencies. When my mother tries to bring up my sister's warehouse job or complain about the halfway house rules, Richard gently stops her. He asks Susan what she plans to do with her own afternoon instead. The toxic triangle is dead. They are finally allowing Jessica to carry the weight of her own choices. I left the diner that day feeling lighter than air. I drove back to my quiet, peaceful house. I walked into my home office and sat at my desk. A framed photograph from my cruise sat next to my computer monitor. It showed Sarah and me smiling on a white sand beach in Miami, the ocean stretching out behind us. I looked at that picture and realized the profound weight of my decisions. I sacrificed 5 years of weekends, cheap lunches, and double shifts to afford that single luxury vacation. But the money I spent on that ticket bought me something far more valuable than a tropical getaway. The act of getting on that plane bought back my entire future. Setting a boundary hurt. Watching my family fracture under the pressure of their own lies carried a deep emotional toll. I cried many tears during those first few weeks. However, I learned a vital truth. True love does not require setting yourself on fire to keep a manipulator warm. Compassion without accountability only finances destruction. Real family support means helping someone through a genuine crisis, not funding their deliberate dishonesty. By refusing to absorb the consequences of my sister's actions, I forced the enablers to face reality. The innocent children were placed in a safe environment where they could heal. The thief faced the legal system and learned the value of hard work. The parents learned the true cost of their vanity and started repairing their own marriage. My finances recovered rapidly once I stopped paying the hidden tax of my sister's lifestyle. Without her constant demands for rent money, car repairs, and fake medical bills, my savings account grew steadily. I slept through the night without fearing the sudden ring of an emergency phone call. I owned my schedule, my home, and my peace of mind. I opened my internet browser and navigated to a popular travel website. I typed a new destination into the search bar. I clicked the calendar dates for next autumn, selecting a 2-week window. The screen loaded a list of available flights to Italy. I found a window seat on a direct flight. I typed my credit card information into the secure payment portal and hit confirm. The booking receipt pinged in my email inbox a second later. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet hum of my air conditioner. The manufactured crises no longer controlled my destiny. Walking away from the chaos was the hardest decision of my life, but it was also the ultimate act of justice.